This is Gene Lance on the Workers Beat Extra. I'm talking to Kenneth Williams, the president of the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans in Dallas, because Kenneth, you've been following the threat to our democracy in the Texas legislature. So what happened?
Well, what happened is an attack on voting rights, which is part of an overall attack on democracy that Republicans are mounting right now. And this attack, because we see these same kind of laws being passed in Georgia and Florida and other parts of the country, and we need to take them more seriously than we have taken them so far. For example, Republicans, we talk about voter suppression, and they are passing voter suppression laws. That's true. But Republicans are no longer satisfied with voter suppression. They're no longer satisfied with trying to stop you from voting. They now want rules to say, even if they do lose the election, they get to overturn the election. So we've gone from voter suppression to election nullification. That's what they're on now, election nullification. And when you can nullify elections, by definition, you don't have a democratic system.
So democracy almost went out the window on Sunday night this week.
Well, it almost went out the window on January 6th. And what's going on now, they are trying piece by piece, state by state, they're trying to achieve a system that will let them do the same thing that Trump wanted to do on January 6th. What did he want to do? He wanted to overturn the election. They are setting up systems where they can overturn an election. In Georgia, for example, they have a provision in that law that says the state legislature can take over elections from certain counties. Now, let's put on our thinking hats and see which counties in Georgia will the Georgia legislature ever take over. Are they going to take over the county that Marjorie Taylor Greene comes from? No, never going to happen. The names of the counties they're going to take over are Fulton County, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, which has a heavy African-American population. Counties like DeKalb County, also a suburb of Atlanta, which has a high Black population. These are the places where they're going to use those laws. And if you think they won't use those laws, you have to look at what they're doing with personnel. They are replacing people who opposed the overturning of the election in 2020. They're getting rid of those people from their own party. They're removing them and replacing them with people who supported the insurrection.
And I believe that it was proposed in the Texas legislature that they could take over different counties in Texas. In other words, the someone from state government could just say that the county elections department was no longer valid and that they were going to take it over. That was one of their proposals. I don't know if it was in that.
Now I'm going to confess, I haven't had a chance to read the final version of the bill that they passed in Texas, so I haven't seen that particular provision. There is a provision that's been reported in the news that said they could overturn the elections with less evidence. Now, what does less evidence mean? Well, I'm going to interpret that to mean they're going to use the same kind of reasoning that they used in the 2020 election. In other words, no evidence at all. If they have a suspicion or if they just make a claim that Democrats engage in voter fraud, they get to overturn the election. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. Anytime Democrats win, Republicans are going to say there's voter fraud, and they don't care about evidence. They've shown in this election here that evidence doesn't matter to them. They lost 63 cases in court in which they did not establish a single case of voter fraud, yet a majority of Republicans believe there was widespread voter fraud. They just couldn't. Go ahead.
They want us to believe it.
Well, they don't care what we believe. They actually don't care what we believe. They're just talking to each other. Mm-hmm. What they plan to do is, Republicans don't care about persuading Democrats about anything. Democrats worry about persuading Republicans. Republicans, their thing is find levers of power and use those levers to get more power. That's their thing. And the only people they're interested in persuading are the people who are already with them. That's it.
we've had discussion about this over the last few months, but the bill that they actually tried to ramrod through, according to the Washington Post, was actually quite a bit longer and worse than what they had been coming up with through discussion and debate and,
Right, right.
and amendments. Mhm.
They added provisions to the bill they were finally trying to push through, which were worse than what they originally discussed.
At the
That's
last
true.
minute and in
Yes.
secret.
Mhm.
So thank goodness the Democrats were able to outmaneuver them on Sunday night. And by walking out and denying a quorum so that there weren't enough people there to vote, they were able to stop it for the time being. But the governor says he's going to call another special session. So it won't be long, I assume, until we'll be facing this again.
That's a promise. They are going to bring the law back. They are going to try to ram it through later on. It's what the Democrats did by blocking the passage of this law is they bought us some time, and they also brought attention to this issue in Texas and in the nation as a whole. That's important.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the only way we're going to stop what the Republicans are trying to do in Texas is at the federal level. There are no political resources in Texas that can stop what the Republicans want to do. Republicans want to snuff out the potential of democracy in Texas, and they can do it unless the federal government takes an action. I'm talking to you, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, and any other Democrat who is trying to hold on to the filibuster. What we're down to now is we're either going to have the filibuster or the 15th Amendment. We're not going to have both. Okay, the 15th Amendment gave African Americans the right to vote. We're either going to lose that part of the Constitution or we can preserve the filibuster, which was a gentleman's agreement between slave owners and between those other founders of the country who weren't slave owners. So that's basically our choice. And if we hold to the filibuster, Republicans do intend to quite seriously set up a minority government, an authoritarian government where they can never lose elections no matter who the people vote for. Mm-hmm. And that's where they're taking us.
And that has a lot to do with why they're trying to rig the voting system now and also the redistricting so that they can take the Congress in the next midterm elections. And it's been pointed out in the Washington Post that if they were in charge in Congress in the midterm elections, if they get a majority, and then they lose the presidential race in 2024, that they would refuse to legitimize that election, just as they tried to delegitimize the 2020 election. In other words, if they win the midterms, we may very well be through with elections in America.
Yeah, and we're as a minimum, we're going to have a constitutional crisis in 2024 if they win the 22 elections. That's as a minimum. But the attack on the elections in 2024 is not just the level at which they did it on January 6th, where the people in Congress were refusing to certify the Electoral College. 2/3 of Republican House members refused to certify the results of the 20 election. That should be a wake-up call. 2 out of 3. Now, they are coming up with lots of different ways to attack the next election. They have a provision in Arizona where the state legislature can select different people for the Electoral College versus who the people voted for. We talked about the provision in Georgia where they get to take over the electoral process in specific counties and maybe throw off the votes of that county. If you just throw out the votes of one of those 2 Black counties that I talked about, Fulton County or DeKalb County, Raphael Warnock can't win re-election. He is gone from the Senate if they use that provision against those counties in 2022.
That's the
if they use it in 2024, Democrats can't win the state.
That's the senator that we just got elected in Georgia.
Yes, that is the senator from Georgia, the first African American senator from Georgia to be elected. If they use those provisions, he can't win. I don't care how many people vote for him.
Now, you've pointed out that a great deal of this voter suppression is aimed at the African-American vote, which it's been true ever since the Civil War, that the reactionaries did not want Black people to have the vote. The question is before us, what are we going to do about it? How can we fight back? Obviously, we need to vote every chance we get, and we need to fight for our rights. Even if they make it harder, we need to stand up and do it. And we need to organize and push politically for the right thing to be done. And I know your organization, the Alliance for Retired Americans, has been on the side of voting rights as long as it has existed in Texas. So what kinds of things do you envision happening?
Well, first of all, we lobby our local elected officials, even those who we think are not going to support us. But we have to do it. We have to do it. We let them know that we're opposed to these kinds of laws that attack voting rights. The second thing we need to do is to contact businesses and let them know that we're paying attention to them. And if there are businesses that are financing politicians who attack voting rights, that's not going to be something that's going to cause us to look kindly on those same corporations. But ultimately, I believe progressives, Democrats overall, from a grassroots level, have got to lobby the Democrats in Washington, D.C. to use the power you already have, the power that was given to them in 2020 to protect the voting rights of their own voters. If they don't do it, it's not just African Americans who are going to suffer. The Democratic Party as a party can't win national elections if they don't let Black people vote. It's that simple. Chuck Schumer will never be the Senate Majority Leader again. There'll never be a Democrat who's the Speaker of the House. None of the Democratic politicians who want to run for president will have a chance of winning if Republicans can just stop African Americans from voting. And if they have rules to overturn elections, well, how do you win there?
So the fight is on. Well, fortunately for us, Americans have a long history of knowing how to fight for voting rights, especially African Americans who have fought their way out of poll taxes and special examinations and all kinds of prohibitions to keep them from voting. So the fight is on, and we know what we're doing, and we expect to win, or at least I do, don't you?
Well, I'd like to be as optimistic as you. And yes, African Americans have done things, but don't start thinking African Americans are magical, right? Don't go with the Stacey Abrams belief that, no, and I'm not criticizing Stacey Abrams, but there's a lot of people who believe that Stacey, she's got an S on her chest, she can put her cape on and overcome any obstacle. That's not realistic. At some point, everybody else is going to have to come together to make sure we protect voting rights. It is more important that white people start to get scared of the loss of Black voting rights for Black people than Black people be afraid of it. We already know what time it is, okay? We have to get white people to understand that if you don't fight for this, you will also lose your rights. We're first on the list, but that won't be the end of it.
All right, so a unified fight is brewing, and that's what it's going to take to win. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kenneth Williams from the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans Dallas chapter. And this is Gene Lance on the Workers Beat Extra.